The hush inside the penthouse felt alive, almost sacred. It wrapped the room like a velvet shroud, layered with the steady whisper of the climate control, the lingering woody perfume of the grand piano, and the faint, distant murmur of the city, drifting up from 40 floors below. For Vivian Thorne, silence was the rarest form of wealth, and she hoarded it fiercely. Curled up on a plush charcoal sofa, she balanced a well-worn leather journal across her knees, a pencil tucked neatly behind her ear. The wall before her was not a wall at all, but a single sweeping pane of bulletproof glass offering a breathtaking, almost arrogant view of the city skyline. From here, the metropolis was a diorama of twinkling lights and silent miniature motion. From here, she was safe. She was alone. This was the supreme irony of her existence. Vivian Thorne, whose voice could command the fervent adoration of millions. In sold-out stadiums, whose face was splashed across magazines in a dozen countries, whose very name was synonymous with raw emotional artistry despised the very spotlight that fed her. She was a creature of quiet corners and whispered melodies, a brunette ghost in her own glamorous life. The world knew the icon, the smoldering gaze, the sharp cheekbones artfully highlighted on red carpets, the soulful ballads that spoke of love and loss with a vulnerability that felt like a shared secret. They did not know the woman who preferred thick cashmere socks to stilettos, who found a party of one with her Steinway to be the ultimate social event, who considered a successful day to be one where she didn't have to speak to a single soul. A notification chimed softly from her phone on the marble coffee table, shattering the silence like a stone through stained glass. Vivian flinched, her pencil skidding across the page. It was a reminder from her manager, Marcus, Studio B, 3 p.m. Don't be late. The label is breathing down my neck. A low, guttural sound of annoyance escaped her lips. Breathing down my neck, she muttered to the empty room, her voice husky from disease. Let them suffocate. It would be quieter. Her gaze drifted back to the view. Out there, beyond her glass cage, was the noise, the endless, grinding noise of it all. The world tours that felt like prolonged abductions, a blur of anonymous hotel rooms and screaming faces. The studio sessions where producers tried to sand down the edges of her music into something more radio-friendly. The paparazzi, those vultures with telephoto lenses who lurked in bushes and delivery vans, waiting to capture a single unflattering moment, a hint of a frown, to be spun into a narrative of her impending meltdown, and the fans. Her stomach clenched. She was grateful, truly she was. Their love was the foundation of her entire world. The reason this penthouse existed, the reason the Steinway was a Steinway and not a second-hand upright. But their love was a tidal wave, formless, overwhelming, and dangerously possessive. It was the hands that grabbed at her clothes, tearing at sleeves. It was the voices that screamed her name, not as a greeting, but as a demand for acknowledgement. It was the letters that didn't just express admiration, but detailed intricate fantasies. The ones who believed they knew her, who felt they had a right to her time, her space, her silence. Just last week, a man had somehow gotten past the building security and was found sitting at her piano, shirtless, claiming he had a song written in his blood for her. The memory made a cold shiver trace her spine. The incident had been kept out of the papers, but the violation of it lingered. Her sanctuary had been breached. The one place that was supposed to be hers was no longer impenetrable. She stood, padding silently across the wide plank oak floor to the window. She placed a palm against the cool glass. The city glittered, beautiful and threatening. It was full of eyes, always watching. The noise wasn't just auditory. It was a constant psychic. Pressure, a million expectations and demands pressing in on her from all sides. It was a hunger she was expected to continually feed, and it was starving her. Marcus had been firm, his voice uncharacteristically grave on the phone after the break-in. Vivian, this is non-negotiable. It's not just about creepy fans anymore. It's a liability. You're worth well. You're worth a lot. And you're a target. You need professional full-time security, a shadow, someone to be the wall between you and the noise, a bodyguard. The idea felt like a surrender. It was an admission that the noise had one, that she could no longer navigate her own life. It meant a stranger in her silence, a permanent witness to her grumpy mornings and her creative fugues. It meant another person to perform for, or worse, to hide from within her own home. She sighed, her breath fogging a small circle in the glass. She traced a single solitary note there, a middle C grumpy glamorous. That was her brand, wasn't it? The diva who had everything and was annoyed by all of it. The world found it charming. They didn't understand it wasn't a persona. It was a suit of armor, and it was getting heavy. The silence felt different now. It felt fragile, temporary. The world was too noisy for her, and it was insisting on moving in. She turned her back on the dazzling, intrusive skyline, her expression a storm cloud of reluctance. "Fine," she whispered to the waiting room, the word tasting like ash. "Send." In the wall. Part 2, The Arrival of the Bodyguard. The rain fell on Manhattan in relentless silver sheets, blurring the majestic skyline into a watercolor smear of gray and gold. Inside the penthouse, the weather matched Vivian's mood, a damp, pervasive gloom. She'd spent the morning pacing, the silence she usually cherished, now feeling like the tense, artificial quiet before a storm. Every tick of the minimalist clock on the wall was a countdown to the intrusion. Marcus had texted. "She's on her way up. Best in the business." "Try not to scare her off," Vivian had snorted. She was the one who needed to be scared. She was the one about to have her life hijacked by a stranger paid to be a professional shadow. The soft, definitive chime of the private elevator echoed through the vast space. Vivian froze, her hand pausing over the piano keys where she'd been absently picking out a dissonant melody. This was it. She squared her shoulders, slipping the well-practiced mask of cool indifference over her features. She would be professional, distant, and make it abundantly clear that this was a transaction, not a friendship. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, and there she was. The first thing Vivian registered was not a face, but a presence. A solidity. The woman who stepped out onto the polished concrete floor moved with an economy of motion that was both graceful and intimidating. She didn't fill the space with noise, but with a kind of dense, watchful energy. She was taller than Vivian had expected, and her posture was ramrod straight, making the already spacious foyer feel suddenly smaller. She was dressed in impeccable tailored black tactical trousers and a dark gray moisture-wicking jacket, neither military nor civilian, but something purpose-built in between. Her hair was a practical, nonsense bob the color of wheat, tucked neatly behind her ears. It was her eyes, however, that were most striking. They were a clear, cool blue, and they performed a lightning-fast automatic sweep of the entire room, assessing sightlines, potential cover, the distance to Vivian, the single exit before finally landing on Vivian herself. The assessment was so swift, so clinical, it felt less like being seen and more like being scanned. "Miss Thorne," she said. Her voice was not what Vivian expected either. It was low, calm, and carried a resonant clarity that cut through the hum of the rain without being loud. It was a voice used to being obeyed. Chloe Bright from Aegis Security. "My credentials." She didn't step forward. She waited for Vivian to close the distance. Vivian did so slowly, taking the offered tablet. It displayed a digital dossier that looked more like a military record than a resume. Expert ratings in close quarters combat, defensive driving, threat assessment, emergency medical response. A photo of a younger Chloe Bright in desert camo, her expression grim under helmet. It was thoroughly, overwhelmingly impressive and utterly sterile. "Ex-military," Vivian stated, handing the tablet back. "It wasn't a question. 8 years. "Army MIP," Chloe replied, tucking the tablet away into a sleek black messenger bag that doubtless contained more than just paperwork. "I've been briefed on your situation, the recent incident, and your schedule for the next month. My priority is your safety and your peace of mind. My presence will be as unobtrusive as possible." Vivian almost laughed at that. How could this woman who seemed to radiate quiet authority from every pore possibly be unobtrusive? Unobtrusive? Vivian repeated, her tone dry as dust. "Right. Well, welcome to the fishbowl." She gestured vaguely at the panoramic windows. "The rules are simple. This is my home. You are not to bother me when I'm working." She pointed to the piano or reading or breathing if it can be helped. A flicker of something, amusement, understanding, passed through Chloe's blue eyes, but her professional mask didn't slip. "Understood. My role is to facilitate your life, not complicate it. Think of me as atmospheric." "A heavily armed atmosphere," Vivian muttered, turning her back under the pretense of adjusting a perfectly straight frame on the wall. She could feel those blue eyes on her, noting her tells, her habits. It was unnerving. For the next hour, Chloe was a ghost of efficiency. She performed a silent, thorough walkthrough of the penthouse, her gaze missing nothing. She noted the strength of the locks, the sightlines from the windows, the layout of the rooms with a soldier's precision. She asked a few brief, pertinent questions about the building's security protocols and Vivian's daily routines. her voice always that same low, respectful monotone. Vivian began to relax minutely. Perhaps this could work. Perhaps this woman was the silent, stoic type who would simply stand in a corner and radiate menace. It was almost preferable. The illusion shattered when Vivian's phone rang, the default Naima tone jarringly cheerful. It was Marcus, no doubt checking to see if she'd fired his best in the business yet. And then it happened. As Vivian reached for her phone, a sound reached her ears. It was soft, almost subconscious. A hum, a faint, terribly off-key rendition of the very same Naima ringtone. Vivian froze, her hand hovering over the phone. She turned slowly. Chloe Bright was across the room, her back to Vivian as she examined the reinforced door to the private elevator. Her shoulders were still set in that military, perfect posture, but her head was bobbing almost imperceptibly. And she was humming. Not just humming, but adding a little doo-wop flourish at the end of the melody, completely butchering it with a cheerful, unself-conscious lack of talent. The contrast was so bizarre, so utterly jarring that Vivian was struck speechless. The ruthless ex-military protector, the woman with the tactical gear and the analytical gaze, was quietly murdering a pop ringtone. The phone stopped ringing. The humming ceased instantly. Chloe turned, her face once again a placid professional mask. All clear on this entry point, Miss Thorne. Vivian just stared at her, the first genuine spark of curiosity cutting through her grumpy resignation. Who was this person? Right, Vivian said slowly, her sarcasm returning as a defense mechanism, atmospheric. I think your weather patterns might be a little off. For the first time, Chloe's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was a crack in the armor, a flash of something warm and alive behind the steel. I've been told my internal barometer is unique, Chloe replied. And was that a glint of playfulness in those cool blue eyes? The banter had begun. The grumpy superstar and the sunshine bodyguard. The walls, both literal and figurative, had just gotten a lot more interesting. Part 3. Mornings from Hell. Vivian's world was a perfect velvet black. The blackout curtains in her master suite were a technological marvel, hermetically sealing her in a cocoon of absolute darkness and silence. It was the only way she could sleep after a lifetime of time zones and adrenaline crashes. In this nothingness, she could almost believe the outside world didn't exist. The invasion began not with a sound, but with light. A single ruthless blade of sunlight sliced through the room, aimed directly at her closed eyelids. Vivian groaned, a sound of pure protest, and burrowed deeper under the duvet. It was a trick of the building's angle, a flaw in the curtain's design. It had to be. Then another blade appeared, and another. The room was being systematically filleted by the dawn. With a sound of grinding gears, the entire left panel of curtains began to retract, flooding the room with the brutal, cheerful glare of a New York morning. Vivian shot up in bed, her hair a dark storm cloud around her head, squinting at the silhouette, standing triumphantly by the window. What in the everlasting hell are you doing? She croaked, her voice raspy with sleep and outrage. Chloe Bright stood, one hand on the curtain control, looking infuriatingly alert. She was already dressed in her standard-issue tactical chic, her blonde hair sleek and perfect. Good morning, Miss Thorne, she announced, her voice a weapon of mass cheerfulness. It's 7:15 a.m., the sun is shining, the city is buzzing, and we have a 9 a.m. vocal warm-up that we will not be late for. I will have you court-martialed, Vivian muttered, flopping back onto the pillows and throwing an arm over her eyes. I will have you deported. I will write a very angry song about you and make millions of dollars, which I will then use to hire a quieter, blinder bodyguard. She heard the soft thud of boots on the plush rug as Chloe approached the bedside. Threat assessment. Low, your aim is poor before coffee. This was the new reality. Mornings from Hell, courtesy of one Chloe Bright. The woman who had, over the past 2 weeks, decided that her duties extended far beyond physical safety and into the realm of wellness and routine. 2 concepts Vivian held in the highest contempt. The next phase of the assault was auditory. Chloe began to sing. It was without hyperbole the worst sound Vivian had ever heard. It wasn't just off-key. It was actively hostile to melody. Chloe Bright belted out a mangled rendition of Walking on Sunshine with the unshakable confidence of a tone-deaf superstar, substituting her own bizarre lyrics. Good morning, good morning. It's time to rise and shin, she sang, vigorously fluffing a pillow Vivian had no intention of using. Don't be grumpy, don't be lazy, or you'll miss the day that's gone all hazy with sunshine. You've murdered a perfectly good song, Vivian groaned from under her arm. I'm calling the police. That's a crime against art. You can file a complaint after hydration, Chloe said, utterly undeterred. The singing stopped, replaced by the clink of ceramic. The smell hit Vivian next. Coffee, but not her coffee. Her coffee was a dark, bitter affair, a jet fuel that shocked her system into consciousness. This smelled creamy, sweet, domesticated. Vivian peeked out from under her arm. Chloe was placing a mug on the nightstand. It was one of Vivian's own, a heavy, beautiful piece of hand-thrown pottery. It was now filled with a liquid that resembled a light beige paint. A mountain of whipped cream wobbled precariously on top, dusted with cinnamon and dotted with, were those rainbow sprinkles? Vivian stared at it in horror. What is that? Your coffee, Chloe said, beaming. That is not coffee. That is a dessert beverage that has made a series of poor life choices. Where is the dark, bitter essence of oblivion I require? I took the liberty of optimizing your caffeine intake, Chloe stated, as if reading from a manual. Black coffee on an empty stomach can lead to increased cortisol and jitters. The fat from the cream slows the absorption, providing a smoother energy release. The sugar offers a quick glucose boost for cognitive function. The sprinkles, she paused, her professional demeanor cracking into a genuine sunny smile. The sprinkles are for morale. My morale is predicated on the suffering of the coffee bean, Vivian argued, but she was sitting up again, eyeing the concoction. The smell was undeniably enticing. Drink up, boss. We've got a big day, and I've preloaded your schedule into the shared calendar. You'll get alerts 15 minutes before each transition. Vivian took a tentative sip. It was disgustingly, decadently delicious. The warmth spread through her chest. She took another larger sip, the whipped cream leaving a mustache on her upper lip that she quickly wiped away with a scowl. This is unacceptable, she grumbled, but the edge was gone from her voice. She watched Chloe move around her room with a frustratingly efficient energy. She straightened the stack of books on the nightstand, aligned the slippers by the bed, and opened the window a precise 2 in to allow in fresh air, all while humming a new, equally disastrous tune. This was the routine. The blinds, the sonic atrocity, the diabetes in a mug, the cheerful bulldozing of all her gloomy, comfortable habits. Vivian pretended to hate it. She levered insults with the precision of a master wordsmith. She complained about the assault on her senses, the violation of her privacy, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this sunny singing fortress of a woman. But as she sat there, sipping the sweet, creamy coffee and watching the city gleam in the morning light Chloe had forced upon her, a strange thing happened. The corners of her mouth, usually set in a firm line of displeasure, twitched upward. The silence she guarded so fiercely had been replaced by a noise that was alive. The oppressive weight of the day ahead felt a little lighter, as if Chloe's ridiculous optimism was a physical force lifting it. She hid her face in the oversized mug, but she couldn't stop the tiny traitorous smile. The audience, were there one, would have gotten their first glimpse. Vivian Thorne, the woman who despised the world's noise, was secretly starting to enjoy the particular off-key sprinkle-filled noise of one Chloe Bright. It was the most terrifying and delightful realization she'd had in years. Part 4. Sparks in the Shadows. The black CUV was a silent armored shark gliding through the neon-light currents of the city. Inside, the world was divided into 2 distinct realities. In the front passenger seat, Chloe Bright was a study in controlled vigilance. Her posture was erect, her gaze constantly scanning the surroundings, the sidewalks, the cars alongside them, the reflective surfaces of buildings. She spoke in a low, clear monotone into her wrist emissary, a stream of calm professional updates to the driver and the secondary car trailing them. Approaching the venue, west perimeter looks clear. Stand by. In the back, shrouded in the dim cabin light, Vivian Thorne was a storm contained in black silk and a practiced scowl. She stared out the tinted window, not seeing the bustling streets, but mentally rehearsing the chords of a new bridge. Her fingers tracing patterns on her knee. The transition from her quiet penthouse to this mobile fortress was always jarring, a sensory whiplash that left her irritable and withdrawn. The car pulled into the service alley behind the concert hall. A chaotic gauntlet of roadies, equipment trucks, and a handful of desperate fans who'd somehow deduced the location. As the car stopped, the dynamic shifted instantly. Chloe was out of the car before Vivian could even unbuckle her seatbelt. The sunny morning companion was gone, replaced by a formidable, impenetrable shield. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were hard, missing nothing. She opened Vivian's door, her body positioned to block sightlines from the crowd, already straining against the security barriers. Eyes forward, step quickly. Chloe's voice was low, a command that baked no argument. It was the voice of a woman used to being heard in a crisis. And then the noise hit, the screams, the flash of cameras, the shouted questions. A hand clutching a Sharpie and a CD thrust through the gap between security guards. "Vivian, please, I love you." Vivian flinched, her own walls slamming up. She kept her head down, her face a mask of detached boredom. But inside her heart was a trapped bird beating against her ribs. This was the part she hated. The grabbing, the hunger in their eyes, the sheer, overwhelming want. Then Chloe happened. She didn't shout, she didn't shove, she simply moved. Her arm shot out, not to strike the fan, but to intercept the waving hand, her grip firm but not cruel on the fan's wrist. "Step back, please," she said, her voice a blade of polished ice. It was not a request, it was a fact. The sheer terrifying authority in that tone made the fan, a grown man, freeze and instinctively retreat. Chloe's body never stopped moving. A solid wall guiding Vivian through the chaos. Her free hand. A steady, reassuring pressure on the small of Vivian's back. Vivian had seen bodyguards before. They were usually large, intimidating men who created space through sheer bulk and aggression. Chloe was different. She was precision. She was economy of force. She was ruthlessly, terrifyingly efficient. She neutralized threats, not with violence, but with an aura of uncheckable competence that was somehow more intimidating. In that moment, surrounded by chaos, Vivian felt a surge of something unfamiliar. Absolute safety, the door to the green. Room hissed shut, locking out the cacophony. Vivian leaned against it, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Chloe was already on her wrist. "MIC principal is secured in green room 2. Perimeter is holding." Next transition in 45. Her voice was back to its professional calm, but then she turned, and the steel in her eyes softened by a degree. "You okay?" Vivian just nodded, words failing her. She was fascinated, horrified, Eric. The transformation was so complete, so instantaneous. How did one person contain such terrifying strength, and whatever the opposite of that was? Because the opposite was what happened later, back in the penthouse. After the sound check, the meet and greet, the endless obligations, the armor came off. Literally, Chloe would shrug out of her tactical jacket, revealing a soft gray Henley underneath. She'd toe off her formidable boots and pat around in socks, and the singing would start. Vivian was at the piano trying to capture a melody that had been haunting her all day, a reflection of that feeling of safe passage through a storm. She played a few tentative chords. From the kitchen, where Chloe was allegedly reviewing security footage, but was actually making them tea, a voice rose. It was an attempt to harmonize with the chords. A brave, wildly off-key effort that mangled the melancholy right out of the tune. Vivian stopped playing. "You're butchering my muse." Chloe popped her head around the corner, a grin on her face. "I think it needs a more uplifting bridge. Maybe a key change, something with a little pep." She began to hum something that sounded suspiciously like a commercial jingle for a breakfast cereal. Vivian tried to scowl, but a laugh escaped instead. "Get out. You have no soul." "I have a very cheerful soul," Chloe argued, bringing over 2 mugs of tea. She placed one on the piano for Vivian. "It just expresses itself abstractly." She then proceeded to give a detailed, hilarious recap of the stuffy event promoters' increasingly flustered attempts to get past her to speak to Vivian, doing a spot-on impression of the man's nervous tic. Vivian watched her. This woman who could freeze a charging fan with a look, now making silly voices and dancing a little shuffle to a tune only she could hear. The duality was mesmerizing. It was like watching a magnificent predator meticulously, tenderly care for its young. The tension simmered in the space between them. It was in the way Chloe's fingers would brush Vivian's when handing her a mug, a jolt of electricity that felt nothing like the professional guidance through a crowd. It was in the stolen glances Vivian would catch when she'd look up from the piano keys to find Chloe not reviewing her tablet, but watching her, an unreadable, soft expression on her face that was quickly schooled into neutrality. It was in their banter, which had evolved from Vivian's dry insults and Chloe's sunny defiance into something richer, more lead, a game they were both playing. "You know," Vivian said one late night, her head resting on the back of the sofa, staring at the ceiling. "For a human fortress, you're surprisingly bubbly." Chloe, seated on the floor while cleaning a terrifyingly complex piece of equipment, didn't look up. "And for a world-famous diva, you're surprisingly not a diva." You just play one on TV. Vivian smiled in the dimness. It's a living. The grumpy thing is a friend, Chloe said softly, finally lifting her gaze. Her eyes shone in the low light, a really good one. But I see the cracks. Vivian's breath caught. The observation was too perceptive, too intimate. It saw past the celebrity, past the wealth, past the art, to the woman hiding behind it all. She felt terrifyingly seen. And the most terrifying part was that she didn't want Chloe to look away. The wall wasn't just shielding her from the world anymore. It was letting her, for the first time, think about stepping out from behind her own. The attack. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of sound vibrating through the concrete backstage. It was the echo of a triumph. For 2 hours on stage, Vivian had given them everything, every ounce of heartache, every shred of joy, every secret melody composed in the quiet of her penthouse. Now, drenched in sweat and trembling with adrenaline, she just wanted the silence of her car. The journey from her dressing room to the waiting SUV was a well-rehearsed ballet of controlled chaos. Security formed a moving corridor through the throng of crew and well-wishers. Chloe was the calm, unwavering eye of the hurricane, her hand. A steadying presence on Vivian's back, her voice a low stream in her earpiece. 5 meters, keep moving, almost there. Vivian kept her head down, offering a practiced, weary smile for the cameras. This was the part she always hated, the transition from the sacred space of the stage to the claustrophobic fishbowl of her life. But with Chloe, the edge was gone. It was just another exit. Annoying, but manageable. They were steps from the open SUV door, almost at safety. Chloe's posture shifted minutely, tension easing. They were nearly clear. It happened in a blur. A figure detached from a shadowed loading bay, a place that should have been secured. He wasn't screaming. He was silent, his face a mask of desperate obsession, eyes locked on Vivian. He moved with feral speed, lunging. Through a gap in security. Vivian saw him a fraction of a second before he reached her. Time fractured. She saw the glint in his handglass, a knife, she couldn't tell, and the naked intent on his face. Her breath froze. No time to scream, no time to react. Then Chloe moved. This wasn't a controlled interception. It was primal, a reflex. Honed in far more dangerous places. There was no shout, no de-escalation, only a whirlwind of motion. Chloe pivoted, wrapping one arm around Vivian's waist and yanking her backward, placing her own body squarely between Vivian and the threat. Her other arm came up in a vicious, precise block, deflecting the man's slashing arm. Vivian heard the sickening tear of fabric, a sharp, pained gasp not from the assailant. Chloe didn't cry out. Her grip tightened like iron. Her body shuddered against Vivian's for one terrifying second. Then the soldier took over, ignoring the attack, ignoring the crimson stain blooming on her side. Chloe's free hand shot out, seizing the man's wrist. She twisted a motion both graceful and brutally efficient. A joint popped. The man screamed, the weapon clattering away. In the next heartbeat, Chloe swept his legs out and drove him face first into the concrete, planting a knee in his back, wrenching his arm up. Her other hand pressed against her bleeding side. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. Chaos erupted. Security swarmed. Voices shouted. Radios crackled. To Vivian, it was muffled, distant noise. Her world had shrunk to the woman. In front of her, Chloe, she whispered, voice broken. Chloe looked up, face pale, eyes blazing with a feral light. The professional mask was gone, replaced by the raw visage of a protector who had spilled blood. Are you hurt? Her voice was rough, strained. Vivian, look at me. Are you hit? The misplaced question shattered Vivian's composure. You're bleeding, she cried, voice rising in panic, hands fluttering toward the dark stain. Oh my God, Chloe, you're bleeding. The grumpy mask, the celebrity armor, the carefully constructed walls, they cracked open and fell away, leaving raw, terrified vulnerability. Her fingers trembled as they touched the warm, damp fabric. The sight of Chloe's blood on her hands sent waves of nausea and fury through her. It's fine. Superficial, Chloe gritted out, though her tight eyes betrayed the lie. She tried to stand, but her leg buckled. Don't you dare, Vivian commanded, a sob laced with dizzying fear. She grabbed Chloe's arm, supporting her. Don't you dare move. Someone get a medic now. She screamed at the frozen security, her famous voice cracking with new power. She guided Chloe back against the SUV, frantically trying to staunch the blood. The world faded into a hum. There was only this, the pale, determined face of the woman who had taken a blade for her. the vivid red staining her hands. "You idiot!" Vivian choked out, tears streaming through her makeup. "You stupid, heroic idiot. Why did you do that?" Chloe's gaze met hers. The feral light faded, replaced by something softer, dazed with pain but intensely focused. She reached up a bloodied hand and with shocking tenderness brushed a tear from Vivian's cheek. "Job description," she whispered, voice thin, but her eyes said something else entirely. They held no regret, only a fierce, unshakable certainty. In that moment, Vivian's fear crystallized. It wasn't fear of the attack or the stalker or the noise of her life. It was a pure, undiluted terror of the void that would exist if this vibrant, annoying, brilliant, sunshine-headed woman were not in it. The wall hadn't just protected her, it had nearly been broken for her, and the thought of losing her was utterly unbearable. Part 6. Caretaking and role reversal. The penthouse, usually a sanctuary of curated quiet, felt different. The silence was tense, humming with the memory of violence and the metallic tang of fear. Hours had passed since the emergency room, the stitches, the painkillers, the instructions for rest. Chloe, pale but stoic, was installed on the vast sofa. Propped on pillows, a white bandage peeking from her borrowed t-shirt, Vivian moved like a ghost, her hands still faintly stained. The grumpy diva was gone, replaced by a woman vibrating with nervous, protective energy. "Right, Vivian," sounded her voice too loud in the hush. She stood over Chloe holding a bulky first aid kit. "The doctor said the dressing needs changing, and you need nutrients." She said the word as if it were foreign. Chloe tried to sit up. "I can do it. You don't have to." "Don't be ridiculous," Vivian cut her off, tone brooking no argument. It was an echo of Chloe's own command from the alley, but laced with anxiety. "You took a knife for me. The least I can do is administer first aid. Now hold still." This was the role reversal. The protector had become the protected. The guarded had become the guardian. Vivian's hands, usually so confident on piano keys, were all thumbs. She fumbled with the medical kit, laying out supplies with the concentration of a bomb disposal expert. She knelt beside the sofa, movements hesitant. "This might sting." "I've had worse," Chloe murmured, eyes fixed on Vivian's. "Face the worry, the determination, the unfamiliarity." Vivian's breath hitched as she peeled back the bandage. The sutures were a stark black line against pale skin. A wave of nausea and guilt washed over her. Her hand, holding the antiseptic, wipe, trembled. Seeing this, Chloe softened. "Hey," she said gently, "it's okay. It's just a scratch." "It is not just a scratch," Vivian retorted, voice thick. "It's a laceration because of me." "Because of a lunatic," Chloe corrected softly. "There's a difference." Vivian didn't answer, focused entirely on her task. She was adorably, painfully meticulous, using 3 wipes where 1 sufficed, placing the new gauze with the precision of a jeweler, smoothing the tape until it was seamless. Finally, she sat back, surveying her work. She looked utterly exhausted. There, a small smile touched Chloe's lips. "Best field dressing I've ever had." Vivian ignored the joke, brow furrowed. "Right, nutrients." She marched to the kitchen and returned with a tray. Tea, water, painkillers, and a bowl of something beige and lumpy. "What's that?" Chloe asked. "Oatmeal," Vivian declared, as if presenting a Michelin-starred dish. "I read, it's fortifying." Chloe took the bowl. The oatmeal was congealed, slightly scorched, with a sad cluster of raisins. It was terrible. It was also touching. Vivian watched, arms crossed, a familiar scowl on her face, but it was a facade. Her eyes were wide, anxious for approval. "Well, eat it. You need your strength." Chloe took a bite. It was as terrible as it looked. She swallowed. "It's very fortifying." A silence fell, but the tension had shifted to something warmer, more fragile. Vivian's performance was clumsy, but its sincerity was disarming. Then a glint appeared in Vivian's eye. She stood up abruptly. "Your morale is low." "My morale is fee," but Vivian was already at the windows. With a dramatic flourish, she yanked the curtains open, flooding the room with afternoon sun. Chloe blinked. Then Vivian turned. She cleared her throat, a look of intense mock-serious concentration on her face, and began to sing. It was a painfully off-key, halting rendition of Chloe's own horrible Good Morning song. She messed up the lyrics and rhythm, but committed with terrifying sincerity. "Good afternoon. It's time to feel less glum," she crooned, deliberately mangling the tune. Chloe stared, mouth agape. Vivian Thorne, queen of melancholy cool, was murdering a pop tune to cheer her up. Vivian marched to the kitchen and returned with a mug thrust toward Chloe. It held a pale beige liquid under a mountain of whipped cream and a reckless amount of rainbow sprinkles. "For your morale," Vivian said, cheeks pink with embarrassment and defiance. Chloe took the mug. She looked from the disastrous coffee to the scorched oatmeal to the woman standing before her, trying so hard to be stern and failing miserably. And she laughed, a real full-bodied laugh that made her side ache. Tears of pain and pure fondness welled in her eyes. Vivian's scowl broke into a small, hesitant, genuine smile. "What, is my technique flawed?" "It's perfect," Chloe gasped, wiping her eyes. "It's the most perfect, terrible coffee I've ever seen." In that moment, something fundamental shifted. The last of Chloe's professional barriers crumbled. This wasn't a client performing a duty. This was Vivian letting her guard down, being awkward and vulnerable, trying in her own hilariously bad way to give back exactly what she had received. She was mimicking not just a routine, but a feeling. She was offering sunshine, however grumpy its delivery. Chloe realized with a jolt that went straight to her heart, Vivian Thorne was letting her see a part of herself she hid from the entire world. The trust in that gesture was more staggering, more intimate than any threat she had ever faced. The bodyguard was being disarmed, not by force, but by terribly sung songs and overcreamed coffee offered by the most magnificent grump on the planet. Part 7. Growing Closer. Chloe's convalescence became a secret, stolen season within the penthouse, a time outside of time. The world outside faded. Vivian had cleared her calendar with a ferocity that stunned her manager. A creative retreat, she'd called it. For the first time, her obligations took a backseat to a person. The dynamic between them softened irrevocably. The lines of employer and employee, already blurred by banter and spilled blood, dissolved. In the quiet intimacy of shared days, Vivian's piano, once a solitary confessional, now had a permanent audience of one. Chloe would lounge on the sofa, a book forgotten in her lap, simply watching. She watched the way Vivian's brow furrowed in concentration, the way she bit her lip when a chord wasn't quite right, the way her whole body relaxed when the music flowed. One afternoon, a new melody emerged lighter, with a skipping, playful rhythm that danced through the sunlit room. It was hopeful. Chloe listened, mesmerized. "That's new," she said softly, Vivian's fingers stilled. A faint blush crept up her neck. She kept her eyes on the keys. "It's nothing." "It doesn't sound like nothing." "It sounds like joy." Vivian risked a glance. "Joy? Don't be ridiculous. My brand is angst-ridden melancholy." "Your brand is a lie," Chloe said, her voice warm. "Play it again." And Vivian did hesitantly at first, then with more confidence. As she played, she began to hum, then to sing, her voice a low, rough whisper, weaving snippets of lyrics into the melody, a flash of gold in a world of gray. "A stupid song to ruin my day," Chloe burst out laughing. "You're writing a song about my morning routine." Vivian's blush deepened, but a smile played on her lips. "It's a cautionary tale about auditory assault." But the truth was in the music. The melody was pure, unadulterated sunshine. It was the musical embodiment of Chloe's laugh, the silly rhythm of her off-key singing, the way she could light up a room simply by entering it. Later that night, Vivian left her journal open on the coffee table. Chloe, passing by, saw the freshly inked lyrics scrolled in Vivian's elegant handwriting. Her breath caught, "Your laugh, a sudden chord that changes every key, the unexpected harmony that's wrecking the song in me. You pull back the curtains and you let the darkness out. I guess that's what this is, what I'm finally all about." "Chloe." Read the words, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked over at Vivian, who was pretending to be engrossed in a film, but the white-knuckled grip on the remote gave her away. This wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a map to the fortress of Vivian's heart, and Chloe was being given the coordinates. Vivian's close voice was barely a whisper, thick with emotion. It's beautiful." Vivian finally met. Her gaze, her own eyes wide and vulnerable. "It's not finished. It's perfect." Their late nights became a cherished ritual. The television was often just a flickering backdrop to their conversations. They spoke of everything and nothing. Chloe told stories of her years in the military. Not the heroic tales, but the absurd ones. The time her entire unit got food poisoning from bad memories. The bizarre things soldiers collected in the desert to stave off boredom. Vivian, in turn, shared stories from her early days, playing in grimy bars for tips, The first time she heard herself on the radio, the surreal experience of fame. Their banter was still there, but it was led now with a new electric charge. "You're a terrible patient," Vivian grumbled one evening as she carefully reapplied Chloe's bandages, her touch now sure and gentle. "You don't know how to sit still. And you're a tyrant of a nurse." Chloe shot back, but she was leaning into Vivian's touch, her eyes closed. "A very capable tyrant." The air between them grew thick with unspoken words. A playful argument about the best takeout cuisine would end with them standing too close in the kitchen, the silence stretching, their eyes locked. Chloe would reach out to brush a stray strand of hair from Vivian's face, her fingers lingering on her cheek for a heartbeat too long. Vivian would hand Chloe a mug of tea, their fingers tingling, a jolt of warmth passing between them that had nothing to do with the ceramic. One night, they were on the sofa, a blanket shared across their laps. A classic film was playing, but neither was watching. Chloe was tracing idle patterns on the back of Vivian's hand, where it rested on the cushion between them. "You have pianist's hands," Chloe murmured, "strong, but so elegant." Vivian turned her hand over, threading her fingers through Chloe's. The action was bold, deliberate, their palms pressed together. "And you have Bodyguard's hands," Vivian replied, her voice husky. "They know how to break things, but they're surprisingly gentle." The tension was a live wire, humming between them. Chloe's gaze dropped to Vivian's lips. Vivian's breath hitched. The distance between them was inches, a gap that seemed to shrink with every pounding heartbeat. They both leaned in, drawn by a force stronger than hesitation. But then Chloe stopped. A shadow crossed her face. She pulled back, her hand slipping from Vivian's. "Vivian, I'm your bodyguard." The words hung in the air. A cold splash of reality. The unspoken rules, the professional boundary came crashing back down. Vivian's face shuttered closed, the vulnerability vanishing behind a familiar defensive wall. She withdrew her hand, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Right, of course. The moment was broken, the spell shattered. The hesitation was a chasm between them. For Chloe, it was a terrifying fear of overstepping, of exploiting the vulnerability, of the person she was sworn to protect. She was just the bodyguard, and crossing that line felt like a betrayal of her fundamental duty. For Vivian, the fear was even more profound. To meet someone this much, to let them this far past the carefully constructed walls, was to hand them the power to devastate her entirely. Her entire life was a monument to self-reliance. To admit she needed Chloe not as a protector, but as a partner was to make herself terrifyingly dependent. They sat in a stiff, painful silence for a long moment. The unfulfilled almost kiss, hanging in the air like a ghost. Finally, Vivian stood up. "I should get some sleep," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier warmth. "Yeah," Chloe said, her own voice rough. "Me too." They retreated to their separate rooms, but the tension didn't dissipate. It followed them, a palpable ache of desire and fear. The growing closeness was no longer a gentle bloom. It was a precipice, and they were both standing on the edge, too terrified to jump and too connected to ever walk away. Part 8. A risky decision. The silence that had fallen after the almost kiss was a living, suffocating thing. It wasn't the comfortable quiet Vivian craved. It was a chasm filled with unspoken words and terrified hesitation. For days they moved around each other with a painful, polite carefulness. The easy banter was gone, replaced by stilted conversations about schedules and security details. Chloe's sunshine had dimmed to a professional, distant glow. Vivian's grumpiness had curdled into a genuine, withdrawn melancholy. The fear was a cage. Vivian watched Chloe, now mostly healed, fall back into her flawless routine. The morning songs now perfunctory, the coffee still delivered, but without the playful sprinkle commentary. Every professional interaction felt like a paper cut, a reminder of the boundary that had so nearly been obliterated. Chloe was pulling away, retreating behind the wall of her job title, and the thought of it made Vivian feel physically ill. She couldn't bear it. The idea of Chloe being just the bodyguard was untenable, but the fear of needing her, of the catastrophic vulnerability that came with wanting her, was paralyzing.